We get an offer about once a week, more often than not two. It seems like everyone and their mother wants to buy Stanton House Inn. And I get it, the logic makes sense. They looked at comparable sales near New York City, they divided the price by the number of rooms, they landed on some kind of number. It's totally defensible, it makes perfect sense. The only problem is, what they've described is just a building. They see the property, they see the address. They never see the practice. And that gap between what a building costs and what a place is actually worth is what this tirade is all about. Because I don't think this is just a Stanton House Inn problem. I think it explains why so much of the hospitality industry feels the same these days. Stay with me. I have lots of thoughts, unfortunately, for anyone hoping I'd keep this brief. If you don't know who I am, my name is Colin Pearson. I'm a fourth generation innkeeper at Stanton House Inn in Greenwich, Connecticut. This house has been in my family for generations at this point. I grew up here, I left, I came back, which is a very neat way of describing a much messier situation and decision. But coming back because I couldn't quite let it go, rather than because the numbers worked or something like that, is the whole point I want to make today. Investment logic produces interchangeable hotels. Every time. To understand why most hotels feel the same, you have to understand the inputs. When you acquire a property as a financial play, the playbook kind of writes itself. You renovate, you signal luxury, you fill rooms, you optimize. The building is the asset. And that's a real strategy. It produces real returns. I'm not arguing against the people who do it that way, and there are a lot of them. What I'm saying is it produces a very specific and consistent output. You land in a city you've never been to. You check into the hotel. Same lobby scent, same playlist, same spa and a bathroom, amenities. You could be in Boston, or Butte, or Berlin for that matter. We fly 5,000 miles and nothing changes. You can buy the aesthetic codes of a place without buying the thing that made it worth experiencing in the first place. And the result is a world that feels expensive, yet also interchangeable. I see it on Greenwich Avenue all the time. Some company opens a store here because they want to say they have a presence in Greenwich. It goes on the storefront list. It looks good in a pitch deck. And don't get me wrong, the store is lovely. It's exactly like their location in Fort Lauderdale, or whatever else they operate that reads as aspirational on paper. Is that individual store special? No. And nobody who opened it expected it to be. Special wasn't in the brief. The same goes for hotels. So if the problem is the input, investment logic instead of hosting logic, the solution has to start somewhere earlier, before the building. Before the renovation, before the first guest. Let me show you where. Most hotel brands are logos. Very few of them have an actual point of view. Seth Godin made an argument recently that I haven't been able to shake. If Nike announced tomorrow that they were building a hotel, for example, you'd have a pretty good idea of what it would be. The feel, the pace, what it would value. You've never stayed in a Nike hotel. It doesn't exist, but you could describe it. You're probably picturing that right now, in fact. Now flip it. If Hilton or Marriott or whatever announced they were launching a shoe brand, you would have no idea what that shoe would look like. Not at all. Godin's point, most hotel companies have logos. A real brand has a point of view. You can feel it even when it shows up somewhere new. Now that sounds harsher than I mean it, but I think it's true. Here's how I apply it. If Stanton House Inn announced tomorrow that we were launching a travel guide series, would you have a sense of what it would feel like? The tone? What it would care about? What it would refuse to include? If the answer is yes, that's a brand. I think the answer is yes here, but only because of something that took years to build, not a renovation budget. Something harder to buy. When someone makes an offer on Stanton House Inn, here's what they're not including in that price. The first is judgment. Not rules, not a training manual. The kind of judgment that comes from growing up in a house and caring about it for decades in a way that doesn't appear on any balance sheet. What to renovate and what to leave alone. Sometimes that means updating a bathroom, Sometimes it means leaving the old fireplace exactly where it is and designing around it. What a guest actually needs versus what they asked for. When to follow a rule and when to dismantle it on someone's behalf. You can describe the values behind that judgment. You can approximate it. But the judgment itself is earned through time, and it doesn't transfer. The second is care. There's a real difference between processing guests and hosting them. And by processing, I mean you checked in. Here's your key. Breakfast is at 8, here's the Wi-Fi. Whereas hosting is a bit more, I know why you're here. I've thought about your stay in advance, and I'm paying attention the way a good host at a dinner party pays attention. Not surveillance, of course. Genuine care for how your time here goes. That level of care is a skill that requires lots of practice. It's not an amenity. You can't add it to the renovation scope. The third thing is harder to name. I'll call it trust built before arrival. There are guests who stay here who already know me, in a real sense, before they walk through the door. They've watched these videos, for example. They've read my newsletters. They've heard me talk about the inn for months. They have a relationship with a version of me, even though we've never met. And that matters, but it only matters because I'm still here. If someone bought this place and I left, every video and every newsletter I've ever made becomes useless to the new owner because that audience trusts me and my family, not the building. I understand completely why no one would pay for that at closing. It's real, but it only has value if I'm still here. And fourth, the most important, is the origin story. Not the facts of it, the truth behind it. The best things I know about running this inn didn't come from a brainstorm. They came from things going wrong. Renovations that dragged, guests who told me the truth, systems that broke at exactly the wrong time. That's where the real learning lives, in the rubble of the experience, not in the strategy session. Our direct bookings, our repeat guests, our reviews, the audience we've built, none of that is a feature of the building. It's the output of years of practice care by people who actually chose this line of work. You can buy a building, you can't buy that. The emotional connection came first here. Most people in this industry do it the other way around. The house was built in 1843. Stanford White renovated it around 1900. The Pearson family, my family, has been part of it since long before it opened as a bed and breakfast in 1985. The pattern in my family is consistent. We grow up here. We go off and explore the wider world. And we usually come back. Before I came back here, I worked in agriculture in Western Massachusetts. I grew things, sold things, and hit a wall. The lesson that followed me home from that period is it doesn't matter how good something is if nobody knows it exists. I had a product people wanted, yet no idea how to reach them. Marketing is the difference between surviving and thriving. That lesson eventually pulled me into hospitality marketing. I worked with boutique hotels and inns across the country, helping them find the guests that they deserved. I built a travel blog. I learned firsthand how audiences form around useful stories and true, authentic local expertise. What I didn't fully understand at the time was that I was building the toolkit I'd need to come home and actually do something with this place. When I came back, I didn't just come back to run an inn. I came back to build a brand around it, to make the philosophy explicit, to create content and systems and a point of view that could live beyond the four walls of this house. That's different from what the previous 3 generations did. And I talk about that without any embarrassment, because I think that tension is what makes me interesting in this very long lineup. I'm not just preserving something, I'm arguing with it a little. Lovingly, but still. The hotel industry is full of people who made money elsewhere and then got into hospitality. That creates a certain kind of business. Rational, well-capitalized, professionally managed. What it doesn't create is an emotional connection to the work. We did it the other way around. The connection came first. The business grew from there. Slowly, obviously. And that direction, that specific sequence, shaped everything for us. What you're willing to protect, what you refuse to cut, what a slow quarter means to you versus what it means to someone who got in just for the returns. A guest typed us a thank you note on a typewriter. Others started leaving records. Guests don't read brand strategy documents, obviously. They don't think about investment logic or origin stories while they're walking through the front door, but they feel the output. You see it at check-in. Someone walks in from the parking lot, usually after an hour on the train or 3 hours on I-85, or a week that ran long in ways they hadn't planned. And somewhere between the front door and the desk, before anyone has said a word, their shoulders drop. They take a deep breath. Their brains are already deciding to relax, even though they haven't consciously made the decision to do so, or have done anything at all, really. That's not our playlist. That's not a scented candle. That's what it feels like when a place was built by people who actually care whether you have a good time here. We keep all the thank you notes guests send us. One came last year, typed on a typewriter, an actual typewriter, from someone who'd driven up from Brooklyn and stayed for a week. In the note, they said they felt like they were staying in someone's home, which is exactly what we're going for. But the medium mattered too. Someone went home, found a typewriter, and typed a note. Though we're very much appreciative of online reviews, of course. And then there's the guests who bring records, not to take home, to add to the inn's collection. So the record is there waiting for them the next time they visit. And so they can share their taste with everyone else who comes to stay with us. And I love that thought. A guest doesn't just want to consume this place and just stay here. They want to contribute to it. They want to become part of it and kind of weave their story into it. That's not normal hotel behavior, which is kind of the point. And you don't get there with a renovation budget, by the way. You can't buy the stewardship that makes it all work. Here's what I'm not saying. Investing in hospitality isn't wrong. Large chains aren't bad. You can have a perfectly comfortable stay at 100 properties built entirely on that investment idea. What I'm saying is most hotels feel the same because they were built using that same line of thought. And that logic, while perfectly rational for what it's designed to do, cannot produce a genuine good host. It can produce a beautiful room. It can produce reliable service. It cannot produce the thing that makes a guest type a thank you note on a typewriter or leave a record they wanted to keep with you. So yes, someone can buy the Seaman Brush House, the official name of this building. They can buy the fireplaces, the rooms, the address, the old floors that announce people walking upstairs, but they can't buy why we stayed here as a family. And I think guests feel that, even before they have the words for it. If you've ever stayed somewhere that felt unique and you've been trying to figure out what that was, tell me in the comments. I'd love to find more places like us out there. And if this kind of thinking resonates, what it actually takes to build a place like this, the decisions behind the house, how we think about hospitality as a practice rather than a product, be sure to subscribe. We put one of these out about once a month. There's also a link in the description to the inn's story. The history here is a little stranger and more interesting than I had room to share today. I'm Colin. This is Stanton House Inn. I'll see you next month.